We discussed in the previous lectures how laws are made. And we agreed that making the law is the right of the community. It is not the president, it is not the king. And we also agreed that historically communities were small, so when they wanted to make a rule or a law, they all sat together and by majority decided what the rule on the behavior of the community should be, or the rule relating to the behavior in the community should be. Now we have communities 1 billion, as in the case of China. Egypt, that was a small country, now is 100 billion, and still the rule is the same. Laws and rules are made by the people. Can I have the 100 million together in one room or in one building? No. So they came up with a solution. Every area in Egypt chooses a representative that becomes a member of our parliament, which itself is called the House of Representatives. And these representatives are entrusted by the people to make the different laws, and each representative is supposed to listen to the needs of his community. So let's remind ourselves. Laws in Egypt today are made by the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives has people representing all areas in Egypt. And what does representing all areas in Egypt means? That every area elects a representative in parliament, or 2 representatives depending, or 3 even, depending on the size of the area, by election. They are not appointed. People vote on it. There are 4 or 5 people wanting the seat. Everybody goes in and votes, and the one with, assume for example, the one with the highest votes, or the one with the majority, becomes the representative. Let's take an example. Assume we have 5, and as a result, none of them has the majority of 50% plus 1. So what we do the first turn of the election from the 5, we take the 2 that have the highest vote, and then we do another election, and the one of them who has 50% plus 1 of the votes becomes the representative in that area. Who decides the number of representatives? Who decides the areas and the number of representatives is the Constitution. The Constitution said that we are allowed a maximum of 450 members in our House of Representatives. What is the number we currently have? Parliament, or the House of Representatives, made a law making the number of representatives less than 450, which is making it 420 members. These members represent all districts and areas in Egypt and are chosen by election, by majority, as I explained. Let us remember, for example, there are 10 people running for a seat to be a representative. Assume an area has 1 representative. It's allowed only 1 representative. And we have 10 people wanting that seat. First, we do an election with the 10. And if one of them gets 50% of the votes plus 1, he's elected. Assume we have 10. Number 9, and we have 10,000 people. Assume number 9 gets 5,000 seats plus 1, then he's elected. Assume nobody gets 50% plus 1 from the 10, which is normally the case, then we do another round of election, only with 2 members, and the one who gets 50% plus 1 is elected. And of course, we understand who elects them are the people living in the community. Our Constitution also provides that there should be some Christians, some workers, and some peasants, youth, handicapped, and people representing people outside Egypt. And so, in addition to the areas, people living outside Egypt are allowed also to have a representative. Egyptians living outside Egypt are allowed also to have a representative chosen by them by election. Now, we have 420. Our Constitution says that the President can appoint 5%. So 5% of the 420 are not elected, but are chosen by the President. Assume our Parliament is 400. 5% of them would be chosen the president, means that 20 members of parliament, sorry, of the House, whenever I say parliament, I mean House of Representatives. 20 members of the House of Representatives will be chosen by the president and will not be elected. Because if you're chosen by the president, you're not going to be elected. Number two, our constitution says that 50% of the people appointed by the president must be women. So the president is allowed to appoint 5% of the members of parliament. Half of that 5%, 2.5%, must be women. 50% of the 5% must be women. So if the president appoints 20, 10 of them must be women. And the decision by the president appointing them as members of the House of Representatives is published in the official gazette. And all the conditions for members of parliament also applies to them. What can anyone run for parliament? Now let's talk about these conditions. Can anyone wake up in the morning and say, I want tomorrow to run for election to be a member of parliament? No, there are very strict conditions. Condition number one, he must be an Egyptian. Can an Englishman who's not an Egyptian run to be a member of our House of Representatives in Egypt? The answer is no. Number two, he must be 25 years of age. At least 25, so you boys or girls cannot run for parliament yet. Number three, he must hold a certificate. He must hold the certificate of basic education. Before, the only requirement was to read and write, and as a result, we got people in parliament who can barely even write their name. Now, you must have a certificate of basic education. Number three, you must have done your military service. If you have 3 brothers, you go to the military, or being exempt, for example. People are exempt if he's the only son, or exempt if his father has died and he's taking care of his other brothers and sisters. Number 3 or 4, if he was a representative in the House of Representatives before, if he was a member of the House of Representatives before, his membership was not cancelled. What does cancelled mean? If your conduct is bad in the House of Representatives, they are allowed to cancel, to kick you out of Parliament. So, if you are a member of House of Representatives and you were kicked out because of bad conduct from you, you cannot run for election again. And then we have in Egypt something called the list of voters. In order to vote, it is not automatic. If you are 18 years or older, you take your national ID, you go to a register, Sigil, and you register yourself as a voter. You must register yourself. It must be positive by you. Not everyone is registered in the register of voters. He must go and register himself. And if you are not registered in the register of voters, then you cannot be a representative in parliament. If you do not care to vote, why would we choose you? If you don't care about your country so that you want to register yourself and have the right to vote, to participate in the public affairs of the country, why should we make you even a member of the House of Representatives? So, if you did not register yourself in Sigil and Nakhibin, the people that are allowed to choose representatives, you are not allowed to run for office of being representative. Number 4, you must have your civil and political rights. What does that mean? It means there are certain crimes, like a crime of fraud and nasb. If you do this crime, you do not have your civil rights. If you do a crime of stealing, if you do a crime of theft, if you do a crime of dishonor, you lose your civil rights. What is your civil rights? The right to buy and sell and establish companies in certain cases. And there are other types of crime. If you plot against this government, against the state, you lose your political rights. What are your political rights? The right to vote and the right to be elected. The right for you to choose the president, the right for you to choose the member of parliament, and the right for you to run for president, and the right for you to run for member of the House of Representatives. What do we call this? his civil and political rights. You must have your civil and political rights. You must not have committed a crime that would affect your civil rights, and you must not have committed a crime that would affect your political rights. What does affect mean? Makes you not able to allow to use your civil rights and not able to use your political rights. What are your civil rights? The right to sell, buy, establish companies. What are your political rights? To run, to elect someone to office, whether House of Representative or President, or the right that you yourself would run for that office. So let us remind ourselves, what are the conditions? What are the conditions for election to the House of Representatives? So you cannot run, you cannot ask to be elected unless you are an Egyptian. You have your political rights, civil and political rights, and they have not been taken away from you. You must be in the register of voters. You must not be less than 25 years old. You must hold at least a certificate of basic education. You must have performed military service or legally exempted from it. Number 7, your previous membership in the House of Representatives was not cancelled. You were not kicked out of the House of Representatives. These are the conditions for you to be able to run, for you to be chosen by the people. But these are also the conditions that the president must find in the people he wants to appoint in parliament. So, can the president, from his 5%, appoint someone who's 23 years old? No, he must be 25. Can he appoint someone who doesn't have his political rights have been taken away from him? No, he cannot. Can he appoint someone who's not registered in the register of voters? No. Can he appoint someone who ran away from military service? No. Can he appoint someone whose membership of the House of Representatives was cancelled because of bad conduct? The answer is no. How many years are you a member when you are chosen by election or by the president, by election of the people or by the president? How many years is your term? How many years you stay as a representative? 5 years, and it can be renewed indefinitely. Yeah. What does that mean? You can be chosen every time. Why am I telling you that? Because the president can only be elected once. He cannot be elected anymore. But the House of Representatives, you can be elected as many times as the people choose you, elect you, as the people elect you, or as the president chooses you. When does the election happen? 60 days before the end of the term. So assume the House of Representatives term ends on the 31st of December 2020. When the elections have taken place 2 months before, which is the beginning 60 days before, which is the 1st of November. Why am I doing the election so early? So there is never a problem with the new House of Representatives taking over, because the role of the House of Representatives in making laws is very critical, and we cannot afford to have any problems in it. So again, House of Representatives 420 members, duration 5 years, elected indefinitely, election 60 days before the end of term, and our 2014 Constitution is the one that organizes our House of Representatives today. We have spoken about the election of the House of Representatives, which is what we call the legislative body. What is the legislative body? The body responsible for making laws. And if you recall, we have 3 authorities. Legislative authority, we spoke about last year, we spoke about judicial authority, which is the court, and executive authority, which is the president. And the executive authority is responsible for running the country and applying the law. Who makes the law? The legislative authority, which is the House of Representatives. Who applies the law? Who catches the criminals? Who applies the law? The executive authority and the judicial authority. Now let us look at the conditions for electing the president. The president, who is the president first? The president is the head of state. He is the top of the mountain. He is the top of the mountain of the executive authority. He takes care of the interest of the people. Make sure nobody invades our country. Make sure the Constitution and the laws are applied correctly by the What is the duration? Under the old constitution, the duration of the president, the time of his ruling the country was, after the election, was 4 years. And it was discovered that 4 years is very short for any president to be able to establish any results. So under the 2014 constitution, the term of the president is 6 years. So he is elected on day one, he rules the country for 6 years, he is allowed to be re-elected by the people once more, only for another term. Question: what is the maximum period that anyone can rule Egypt today? Okay, first term 6 years, second term 6 years, and that's it. He cannot run the country, he cannot be re-elected anymore. Why are we doing that? To prevent dictatorships, because when presidents stay too long in power, they do not run the countries correctly. What are the procedures for the president? Again, you remember the House of Representatives? The House of Representatives must be elected 60 days before the end of term. So if the term ends on the 31st of December 2020, the House of Representatives, new members, the ones that are coming on January 1st, must be chosen as of the 1st of November 2020. Imagine. What is more important for the country, for running the day-to-day? Of course, the president. So it is not 60 days, it is 120 days. What that means, that if the term of the president ends on the 31st of December 2020, then 120 days before that term, the new president coming after him should be elected, or if he's going to be elected for another term, he is chosen. Why are we doing this? To ensure continuity. What are we talking about here? We're talking about 4 months. 4 months before the end of the term of the president, the new president must be chosen, or if the same president is allowed to run again, he must be elected. Okay? Number 3, the president should not be part of any party during the time he's president. He can be a member of the party before he's president, he can be a member of a party after he's president, but he cannot be a member of the party during the duration that he is the president of the republic. So let's remind ourselves. Duration of president 60 years, renewed only once. Election 120 days before the end of the presidential term. That the new president must be announced, is not only elected, must be announced 30 days before the end of the term of the president before. So let's do it numbers. The term of the current president, assume the term of the current president ends on the 31st of December 2020. 120 days before that, the elections must take place. 30 days before the 31st of December 2020, they must announce who is the president. They must announce, again, continuity. It is very important. He's head of the executive authority. He's responsible for appointing everyone in it, so we need continuity. We cannot leave the people in doubt who's going to rule them. So elections, 120 days, announcement of the next president, or if the same president is staying, 30 days before the end of the term of the first president. We have spoken about the need for election of the president, when he should be elected, his term of 6 years. Now we are going to talk about the condition. There are conditions for choosing the president, as there was conditions for choosing the House, the members of the House of Representatives. Condition number 1, of course, he must be an Egyptian, like the House of Representatives. But here, we are dealing with a more serious problem. We must make sure that he is really Egyptian. So, not only is he required to be an Egyptian, but he must have Egyptian parents. And that his parents or his wife are not holding any other nationality. Let us repeat this again to understand it clearly. The only condition in the House of Representatives was he's an Egyptian. I don't care who his wife is, I know his parents could be American, his wife could be British, I don't care. But the president is holding a very important position. So the condition is he must be born to both his father Egyptian and his mother Egyptian. He cannot have an English mother, for example, and that his mother does not have any other nationality except Egyptian, and his father does not have any other nationality except Egyptian, and his wife does not have any other nationality except Egyptian. I do not agree with this requirement, because if you hold the nationality of another country, that does not mean you're not loyal to Egypt. They believe that if you are Egyptian, your parents are Egyptian, mother and father, and your wife is Egyptian, that will prove loyalty. I disagree. Loyalty is in the heart, and the people should be entitled to choose whoever they want, as long as he himself is Egyptian. He must, again, some of the conditions that we have for the House of Representatives, he must have performed his military service. If he was of age of going to the military, he must have gone to the military, or exempted from it if he, for example, has an illness, or is the sole son, or something like that. Again, the issue of age. He must be 40 years or older. So can now 39 years old run for president? No. Can you run for president if you are 19? No, my friend, you have to wait 21 years. This condition varies from country to country. Some countries 30, some countries 35, some countries 40. But again, the age is not a sign of anything. It is the people that should be allowed to choose their president. And as you can see, in a lot of the European countries, like Canada, some countries in Europe, England, you will see that the age of the head of state, head of the executive branch, is coming down dramatically. Okay, what is left? He must have his political rights. Remember, we spoke about this. What are the political rights? There are certain crimes. If you commit them, you are not allowed to buy and sell, because it deals with your honor. If you stole from someone, if you are dishonest with someone, you lose your civil right. What is your civil right? The right to trade, to buy and sell. This is because of certain crimes. And what are political rights? The right to be elected to the House of President, the right to be elected president, and the right to be elected in the House of Representatives. And the right to elect, not to be elected, but also to elect. This is part of political rights. There are certain crimes, like crimes against the state. If you try to overturn a country, your government, you lose your political rights. So what is the condition? You must, to run for president, you must have your civil and political rights. Now we have dealt with the conditions. Egyptian, parents Egyptian, wife Egyptian, enjoy political rights, perform military service or exempt, 40 years old. Now there is another important element. What happened in Egypt in the past is suddenly, before an election for president, someone appears from the blues and he pays people to vote for him, or doesn't pay people to vote for him, or people vote for him because they have no other options. So there was a need to change, to add a condition for choosing the president that would ensure that whoever is running for president have some popularity in the country. So what is the condition that ensures popularity? Number one, there are one condition, either or. This condition or this condition. Condition number one, if he is recommended, if 20 members of the House of Representatives representing different parts of Egypt write a letter saying, we recommend Mr. Mahmoud as president. That is option one. So what happens? If I don't know members of parliament, I am a good man, I know people in Egypt, but not know members of parliament, there is another or he has the support. People sign a letter, 25,000 Egyptians sign a letter saying, 25,000 Egyptians having the right to vote, remember, having the right to vote, sign a letter of support saying, we think Mahmoud would be a good president. Now, can I have the 25 million out of Cairo? Can I go to Zamalek and choose 25 and then claim that the president has the popular support of the country? No. These 25 must be from at least 15 governorates in Egypt, and from every governorate a minimum of 1,000. Again, it's a test of popularity. Either 20 members, at least 20 members of parliament support recommendation of 20 members of parliament, or a big or, 20 support of 25,000 Egyptians who have the right to elect, from 15 governorates, in each governorate not less than 1,000, to ensure that the gentleman has the necessary support. So, let's remind ourselves, what are the conditions? He must be Egyptian parents. Egyptian parents and his wife do not have any other nationality other than Egyptian, which of course means that his wife must be also Egyptian. He must enjoy his civil and political rights. He must have performed military service or been exempted from it. He must be at least 40 years of age. Then the last condition is, which is condition number 6, either he has gets the recommendation or support of 20 elected, I underline, members of parliament. Can he be chosen by 20, appointed by the president? No, it must be 20 elected members of parliament. Elected means elected by the people, not chosen by the president from his percentage. Or he has the support of 20,000 Egyptians who have the right to vote, and that 25 is divided to 15 governorates of 1,000 people per in each governorate at least. We have spoken about the conditions for being chosen as president. Said Egyptian, must be Egyptian parents, Egyptian wife, and all of these. Now we're going to talk about what are the procedures for electing the president. Very simple, straightforward. Assume there are 4 names that want to be president. Egyptians vote on them by secret ballot. What means by secret ballot? That they are given a paper, they write the name of the person they choose, or the name is written and they just mark it with a marker, and then that paper is put in a closed box that no one is allowed to see except when they are counting the votes, and that is what we call by secret ballot. By open ballot would have been that he goes in, he says, I choose Mr. X, and they write down who he has chosen. No, this is totally different. He marks on a piece of paper the name of the man that he wants. It is closed, the paper is closed, put in a box, and then the box is counted. There are also other procedures like which precinct, which police office to go to. People in Cairo, where do they go to elect? People in Alexandria, where do they go elect? This is all organized by law. And then after the president is chosen, on his first day, he takes the oath of office. Whom does he take the office? He swears to serve the Egyptian people, to protect the interests of the country. He swears to it. Where does he do that? In front of the House of Representatives, and on the first day of his term, his work starts. We have spoken about the term of the president. We have spoken about the conditions for president, but now we're going to speak about what happens if the president resigns. Assume a president for 6 years comes on year 3 and decides to resign. He's fed up with being president, he wants to go and fishing. What are the procedures? Or the president is killed for any reason, what are the procedures? Or Parliament decides that the president should be kicked out of being president due to mistakes by him, what are the procedures? Or due to a crime that he made. Let us start by reminding you, whom does the president take the oath of office in front of? The president takes the oath of office to protect the interests of the Egyptian people, to protect our territory, in front of the House of Representatives. Whom does he submit? Whom does the president submit his resignation to? He submits it to the House of Representatives. I made a big fuss about the recess. I said Parliament takes 5-month holiday. Assume the president decides today that he wants to resign, and Parliament is on holiday. Whom does he submit can he submit his resignation to the members of Parliament, to the House of Representatives while they are on holiday? He cannot. Whom does he submit his resignation to? To the judges of the Supreme Constitutional Court. What is the Supreme Constitutional Court? It is the highest court in the country, and he submits his resignation to them if the House of Representatives is not available. House of Representatives cannot be available in case, for example, they are on holiday, or in case there is re-election for the House of Representatives, or in case the president decides to hold new elections for the House of Representatives. So now he resigned, he dies, or he resigns. Or if he dies and resigns, then the House of Representatives will announce that the post is vacant, that there is no longer a president. Okay, but let us deal, now we've dealt with resignation, now we've dealt with death, let us deal with another situation, which is inability. Assume, like in the case of Tunisia, the president gets a stroke, that he is still alive, but he's unable to perform his duties in the proper way. Who assumes his authority? It is assumed by the Prime Minister. So we have three situations. Resignation, post is vacant by the House of Representatives, new president is chosen. Death, post is vacant, announced vacant by the House of Representatives, and the new president is elected, chosen. Number three, inability, still alive, still kicking. In year 3, he has an illness. He cannot perform his duties in the proper way. Who takes over some of these duties, or in some cases all of them, like in the case of President Tunisia, who had a stroke and was unable to do anything? In this case, the Prime Minister. But please remember, in this case, we do not choose a new president. That president continues in his term. So if in year 3, he has inability, like an illness, stroke, that does not allow him to run the country, and the Prime Minister runs in his place, he still remains president until the end of his 6 years, and the Prime Minister during that period performs whatever duties the president is unable to perform. Now we go back to our previous example. President resigned, president dies. We said the first step is the House of Representatives announces that there is a vacancy. Okay. When there is a vacancy, who becomes president? It is the Speaker of Parliament, as long as he does not run for the post of president. Okay. Now, we spoke about him resigning, clear. We spoke about his death, clear. Now let's talk about another situation. Assume the president is accused of treason, treason. Who can accuse him of treason and decide to remove him from office? It is the House of Representatives. 2/3 of members of the House of Representatives. So if 2/3 of the members of Representatives decide to remove the president, they can remove him and announce that the post is vacant, and in this case, the Speaker of the House assumes the position of the President until new elections are held. Let us remind ourselves of a scenario I spoke about in the previous slide. What is that scenario? President is dead. Death can come at any time. Or the president resigns. President can resign at any time. But we have a practical problem. Parliament is on holiday during the summer holidays. Or Parliament is dissolved. You remember, the president is allowed to dissolve Parliament and invite new elections. Who replaces Parliament? Who replaces the House of Representatives in this role? We said the Supreme Constitutional Court. Let us now deal with the situation of the Supreme Constitutional Court on its own. First assumption, President resigns. Second assumption, or dies. Second assumption, Parliament is on holiday, recess, or Parliament is dissolved. Dissolved is when the President uses his right to dissolve Parliament and appoint and invite new elections to choose new members of Parliament or House of Representatives. He's dead. Can we leave the country at a standstill? No. We agreed that if he's dead, we agreed that if he wants to resign and Parliament is not there, recess or dissolve, he submits his resignation to the Supreme Constitutional Court. Now, okay, so he's resigned. Who announces that the position is vacant? The Supreme Constitutional Court, because House of Representatives is not there. Who replaces the president as an interim president until a new president is chosen? The head of the Supreme Constitutional Court. He is the interim president. What does interim president mean? He is the president since from the date of death of the president, from the date the announcement that the president is dead or has resigned, until the date where a new president is elected and chosen by the people. How quickly should we choose the president? From the day he resigns? Sorry, from the date he resigns, from the date his vacancy is announced, whether by death or by resignation. A new president must be chosen within 90 days. Not 91, not 92, within 90, which means 70, 40, 30, 60. We never reach 90. Last question. What can the interim president do or not do? He is the interim president while a new president is chosen. Question number 1. Can he run for president? The answer is no. If you are interim president, you cannot run for president. Okay. Now imagine the House of Representatives, the head of the chairman, the head of the House of Representatives is the interim president, and he wants to run for president. He has to resign from interim president, and the head of the Constitutional Court is chosen as interim president instead of him. You have a condition number 1, an interim president cannot run for president. Number 2, he cannot amend the Constitution. During that period of an interim president between a president and a new president to be chosen, the president cannot request the amendment of the Constitution. Number 3, he cannot dissolve Parliament. He cannot say Parliament go home. He cannot. He's an interim president. He's just there temporary. Interim, think about it as a temporary teacher. Think about it as if I am away for a lecture and someone comes in, he teaches half a lecture, teaches a whole lecture. He cannot replace me. He cannot do the exams. He cannot do the assignments. Temporary. So number 1, interim president cannot run for president. Number 2, he cannot ask for amending the Constitution. Remember, we said amending the Constitution can be requested by the president. He cannot. Number 3, he cannot dissolve the House of Representatives. Remember, I told you any president chosen correctly can dissolve the House of Representatives under certain circumstances. An interim president, or I like using more, a temporary president, cannot dissolve the House of Representatives. Even more importantly coming up, he cannot dismiss the government. He cannot fire the prime minister. He cannot fire the ministers. He is a temporary president, then he must live with them. Remember, interim means temporary. He's from the date of the announcement of the vacancy, death, resignation, or even kicked out. If 2/3 of members of parliament decide to get rid of the president, they can do that. From the date of their announcement that he's no longer president, an interim temporary president is chosen, and the job of the interim president is just to run the country without running for conditions for that. He cannot run for president. If he wants to run for the president, he has to resign. He cannot ask for amending the Constitution, which is the right of every other president, but not the interim one. He cannot dissolve Parliament, which is again the right of any president elected, but not the interim temporary president, or dismiss the government, fire any of the ministers, because remember, he's temporary, he's a caretaker, and a new president will be chosen within a period of not more than 90 days to ensure the stability of the country.